Hello, everybody. John Novak with Next Software. I wanted to go through our automated trading system and I wanted to talk about several different things. The very first thing is what the system does and what it doesn't do. The first thing that it does is it does all of the work on the large chart. What it doesn't do is it doesn't do work on the small chart yet. And in my management video, which you can go watch on YouTube, we discussed exiting when there's a higher or lower divergence, trailing your stops when there's new pivots, managing your positions at key areas, and if you manage out, you can look for continuation trades. And then ultimately, when is it best to skip a trade? Uh, all of our management rules are in the user guide under the trade management section under NinjaTrader indicators. So if you need a refresher on management, please go review the user guide. What I've done is I've done market replay for the last 2 days, Thursday and Friday of the end of September, and I ran the system as is with a couple different settings to show you some differences. The first one I ran was the default template, getting in before the mid-band breaks with the session blockers on, max loss. I put it 4K, not 3K, but would have stopped at 3. And then our normal ATM. Now this does not have any large chart management. Here's the settings. You can pause the video and go back and look. But anyway, it's horrible. It lost $4,000 one day and then it lost $1,000 the next day. I ran the second template, which is getting in after the mid-band breaks, and it lost $1,400 on Thursday and made $135 on Friday. And then I've been testing out a new template, which I made a short video for, which is in our Discord. I'll make it available to you guys as well. But this next setting, what I did is I moved the entry area back 7 ticks. I got rid of the divergence requirement because I'm going to be managing this on my own. And I'm running a ATM that has 3 at 80 and then break even after 40. Same thing, just 3 at 80 instead of 2 at 40. And this is unmanaged on the small chart still. And it made 850 on Thursday and it made 3,700 on Friday. So what I've done, and again, you can see obviously different settings are going to give you a lot of different results. But what I've done, and notice 850 on the first day. I went back and replayed the day. And in this rest of this video, we're going to go through all the trades it generated, a couple extra opportunities that you might have taken, how to manage the trades properly, and also how to correctly do continuation trades as well as maybe incorrectly. So we'll take a look. So this is the first trade of the day. Again, just starting on Thursday. First trade it was trying to generate, didn't get a fill. Second trade it tried to generate, didn't get a fill. Third trade it tried to generate, got a fill. It went down a lot further, and then eventually got a fill. Now, once you get a fill and once you start to get a pivot to the downside, if there's divergence potential, you can lessen your risk. I left the stop behind a 34.5 reversal bar marker. So if there was an up bar on the big chart, I'd be out. You'll see this is going to be kind of a common theme here. But anyway, hopefully after the pivot down, it just keeps going, makes it to the fib. And ultimately, it did make it to the fib where we got out and out with divergence on the runner. And netted a little bit of money on that one. And then after it was over, because we had a good top and we came off the mid-band and the triggers are very far away and we have room to our target, this is what a continuation trade looks like. You need to, and you can get in at the edge of fibs if you really want to, but For our purposes, we're going to wait until the small triggers are at least below the large triggers, and then try to sell a little pullback if possible. And again, keep in mind our target is fibs again, and then maybe fibs on the next chart, the higher chart. And then ultimately, and again, what we're doing is we're taking this trend trade short that didn't finish the move, and we're taking a second shot at it over here. Anyway, this is bonus trading, of course, but as you discretionarily manage your small charts and large charts and systems, that was a good win that we had, but the big move, which happens sometimes later, you get the opportunity to make a little bit more money. Anyway, long story short, we hit our first target. I pulled the stop down. I don't know what happened after that, but here's the next trade. Again, I mean, it's just so picture perfect, right? Everything's going down, a nice pullback to mid bands. We got 1-to-1s helping us. We got the 34.5 reversal bar marker helping us. And this one goes down to the prior pivot stop out. We're getting kind of close to the fibs. So, if you get a divergence pivot stop out that's close to the fibs, if it keeps going and gives you the rest of your money, great. If you get that second divergence from a prior divergence, it usually goes much higher. And, this is what happened. We got the first target, and it went higher, and obviously went higher. And, if the small triggers were below the large triggers, we'd take a continuation short. So we have to kind of wait that out and see. And then ultimately you can see the small triggers never made it below any of the large triggers, so we never went continuation short. And then, had you have left it in, you might have got first profit target and break even. If you are managing your positions, you have to make sure you disable your strategy, or it's going to put you back in again. Anyway, long story short, you'll see this theme quite a bit. The other thing too, it went up a little higher than expected, of course, after that trend trade short. Hit the mid band, which it does a lot. Lots of room. We teach this. If there's more than a full bar away to the large triggers, that big gap, usually the mid band holds. And many times, look, the same reason you exit on a lower divergence, if you were long, which you wouldn't be long here, but let's just say you were, you'd exit with the lower divergence. Sometimes that second lower divergence from the perfect spot can be your continuation as the small triggers get below to get the rest of that money. Anyway, just an alternative theory to finishing off the move and making it down to the fib. If you haven't watched the trading the edges, tops and bottoms, and talking about good tops and not making it to fibs, that's a good video to watch. We have a bunch of videos, obviously. Anyway, I didn't take this one, but sure would have added a lot to the bottom line right there. And this is one where all of the system rules were met, but we weren't quite above the mid band at this point. However, it's a good bottom. And, again, look up here. What's in the way between this entry area and the first lines? Literally nothing. So, again, discretionary trading, not system trading. And I did not take it, so it didn't add to the total. But really a good look for, anytime you get large triggers and 1-to-1s and fibs, it's not a bad look. Anyway, just pointing that out. Here's another one. System trade. Missed the entry. So I jumped in after an up bar, got a horrible fill, and then it was literally like I was doing replay at 30 times speed, which the lower divergence should have been my exit right here, but I took a full loser because it just went so fast on replay. That I just couldn't even do it. But you can see it. lower divergence right here, close below, get out, and save a whole bunch of money on that. I did not. But still, it's a good training experience. Sometimes when you're doing replay, if you go too fast, you're going to miss something like this. And, it's obvious when you look at it in hindsight, after you push pause. But you have to say, look, these are our rules. 2 lower divergences, you're going to get out, and then that's the end of a trade. So could have saved a whole heap load of money right there. And then look, system short was perfect. Unfortunately, I forgot about news on Thursday at 8:30 when I was doing this replay, just lessons. But the system did a fantastic trade. It went short, and it made it to fibs on both charts with pivot stop outs on both charts, which would have been the perfect exit, but it got out break even. So this all happened in like a millisecond at 30 times replay speed. So anyway, but the rules are still the same. Had you have gotten in, and this wasn't news, divergence, pivot stop out at fibs is the perfect exit. Don't take any more trades after that. Hopefully that's a pretty easy lesson to see right there on exits. Again, system got short, looks perfect, triggers are through, everything's strong, lots of room. It went down and I got myself bumped out, but I put myself back in because the system was still on. I brought my stop down to manage at the pivot stop out at the bottom. Got me back in, and then ultimately I thought there was divergence potential here, so I got myself out. And because I had forgotten to turn the system off, it got me back in again. And I was like, you know what? That's a good look. I'll just stay in. So really, it should have been 1 trade, if not maybe 2. But anyway, long story short, with a perfect look and everything going your way, luckily it went down, made a bunch of money. So that was a nice thing. And again, because I didn't turn the system off, and the system's going to try to go short. And again, this is not a good spot after divergence, 1-to-1s, especially 1-to-1s with divergence on them. I mean, that's just the end of the trend. It doesn't matter. That area would have to break before you even thought about it. So I didn't get in. It wouldn't have been filled anyway, but I tried to get in going through once the triggers got through the fib to see if I could jump on the short. And it went down, but I had a divergence that closed above the 1-to-1s. I actually put my stop right there, and I got slippage, which happens. But I didn't lose any money on that really, but maybe could have been out just a smidge earlier. But anyway, no harm done. Anyway, I opted out of the second chance from the edge of fibs. Probably could have taken that one, but that's okay. I didn't do it. So when we go through the total money at the end of the day, just think about the ones that I might have taken and those extras. But anyway, long story short, if you took it, you could manage here and here, and then that would have been a higher divergence to get out. The pattern is so easy to see, but really a lot of extra money right there had you have done it, or I have done it. And then ultimately, the system went short here, and I put the stop above the 1-to-1s and above the 34.5 reversible marker. So it's going to lose like $150 a contract if it does, which it probably will, because as I wrote down here, this is the most horrible look for going long. We had divergence and higher divergence from a fib and from 1-to-1s. You can almost guarantee yourself a loss if you go short into double divergence from fibs and 1-to-1s, especially a higher divergence. It's just guaranteed loser. I probably should have got out there. But anyway, it was on a replay, 30x, so fast. Sometimes you don't get to manage as quickly as you want. But that's a trade you damn sure shouldn't take. Anyway, knowing when not to take a system trade is just as important as when to manage. But obviously it lost, just like we thought, after a good bottom. Just didn't lose as much, but anyway, we'll leave it at that. And then this one went long, and it had, I actually had my system off because I was managing, so I didn't take the long, but I wanted to show you this, like had you have taken it and gotten out. The continuation as your small triggers start to get above your large, and maybe a second divergence long, like we talked about in that last slide where it went down for 1,000,000 miles. This is the up version of that. And again, you'd manage at resistance and then see if you can get to the next big resistance with the trend. That didn't work. Anyway, I got stopped out below the pivots, and I got some slippage just to add insult to injury. So I lost some money there. What, $2,500 for the morning so far. And then the system tried to get filled right there, and it really hit fibs with the triggers, and I missed the short, which happens. And then, look, there's another trade that I think you guys would take this on your own during the day. Obviously, a huge, strong downtrend. Everything is screaming. But the system is not going to take a trade for one reason. The EMA is too far above the large triggers. But when you go to your small chart, when you have one-to-ones and mid-bands right at the edge of triggers, you got to take that trade on a discretionary basis. I did not take it to add money to the bottom line, but man, that's the one you should take without question. And the system's not going to. And the reason why is because the EMA is too high above it. Maybe, if you're doing discretionary, you might change that one setting from 13 ticks to 35 ticks or something. Anyway, perfect discretionary trade. I didn't take it, but you can see manage, and you make a bunch of money. Then the system went long. I mean, the entry was down here. It would have gotten filled, but I was like, man, I really need that mid-band inside the trigger. So I moved it up a few ticks. Literally the most perfect long trade look on both charts you can get. And the result of that one, made a bunch of money. And then, one of the other things, I added this slide in. Once you get a pivot and you get a close up and you're testing the highs again, you can trail your stops behind pivots. Realistically, that's add on to your trend trade long and make more money, but I didn't do it. I even wrote it in the next slide. I did not do it, but this is a perfect place to add on to your trend trade long with nothing in the way up to a fib. And again, it was a great win for the system, but you could have doubled down and made a whole bunch more money with that perfect look right there for another trend trade, especially with one-to-ones right at the triggers edge. Love that. Another slide I made is this one didn't have a system trade, but if it did, you would have to be ultra cautious with the small triggers way below everything, and then you get a pivot stop out and you've got very weak triggers. This will end a trend so fast that if you were in, you'd have to manage. This is also a good look where you would never take a long trade over here somewhere if the silly system did it. It didn't do it, but anyway, just making a point. I also want to make another point. Again, the triggers were getting weak, so it's not going to go short. Whatever the reason is, or it missed the entry a little bit higher. You can see the limit order coming down. When you get the perfect spot, mid-band, edge of the triggers, one-to-ones, you got to take that short. I didn't take it again for the reasons that, again, I don't want to jack this thing up to $1 million in a day, but you can see pretty clearly that's not a bad opportunity for adding on or doing a trade on your own. This is a system trade. Again, I think a very perfect trend trade, one-to-ones right at the edge of triggers. I love this look. Ultimately, it did go down all the way down to one-to-ones, so it made a ton of money. And then the system gave another signal. But because I was managing it, I had disabled it. And we get to the edge of the triggers with the midband, which is perfect. But because we were coming off the 1-to-1, I wanted to wait for a down bar. And there was never a down bar. So it just kept going up and up and up. Sometimes those 1-to-1s will kill a trend super quick. So as we roll on, there was another system trade here. And because there's a red fib still in play, the triggers weren't quite as strong. This is one that I would definitely put the stop below the reversal bar marker. If it goes, great. If it doesn't, you don't lose as much in this situation. Fortunately, it went up very nicely. And the system was trying to place another long signal down here, which was below all of the triggers, and I just didn't really want to do it, so I canceled this order long right here. Since I was managing, I had it disabled, and I turned it off. It went up anyway, but it never would have gotten filled, but it looks good in hindsight. Anyway, my exit was pretty bad. Look at that, right at the midband and triggers. But anyway, long story short, you're not going to catch them all. That's okay. But we did have divergence from 1-to-1s, and I don't know how many times I can tell you weak triggers with divergence or pivot stop outs from 1-to-1s. Trend is not going to continue. It's just not going to. Here's another one where the system generated the arrow because there was a tail, but it had the limit order too low. And man, I could have probably moved it up just a little bit and caught that trade. It was really, I mean, it just doesn't get any prettier than that. It was right there, and I was like, I should move it up. And at 30 times replay, by the time I even thought about it, but pretty easy win for the system to get up there. I just didn't get it. And then ultimately, this one didn't get filled either. Had you have taken it, you would have had to really kept running into lots of stuff, and the small triggers get below, you would have had to manage that trade had you have gotten a fill. And then ultimately another one where intrabar these large triggers started to turn up, so it's going to generate a signal, but sometimes they can uncross if it comes back down, but our system won't terminate the trade as it is if they uncross. So this is one where, again, you have to use your discretion. Are you going to take it or not take it? I chose not to take it. And of course, it took off and freaking went. Usually a pivot stop out at the midband is a really good spot to try it after an up bar. I just didn't do it. Anyway, long story short, no big deal. That would have been a whole bunch more money. You can see how much money I passed up on. Perfect trend trades or termination on the small chart. This one system, I moved the order down below the 1-to-1s because it's the most perfect look on the planet, everything that we love, and I got stopped out above the 34.5 reversal bar marker. And, I wrote the note on there, even perfect trades lose sometimes. Sometimes there's no reason to lose more. I can always do a continuation, but because the small triggers were so far above my large triggers and there's no areas up here, there's no reason to lose extra. So perfect trade, perfect entry, just didn't work. Happens sometimes. The next system trade was a short, which I love. So because the triggers were a little past the reversal bar marker, I gave it a little bit more room. And then ultimately, if a second higher divergence closes above, I'm not going to lose anything. And sure enough, it went up. And I forgot to turn off the system on replay. So it put me back in at the same spot, unfortunately. And I managed out of it, break even, and then I got lower divergence, so I got back in. And then my next slide. Ultimately, I messed that one up 9 ways a Sunday, but because I didn't turn my system off, and again, look, the second shot might have been from the edge of fibs up here where I could have taken another shot, or anyway, this one's lower divergence, so I tried, none of it worked. Anyway, not a very pretty picture. I gave back some money on that one. You're going to make a mistake every day. It just happens. System short. I got in coming off of the mid-band. The system entry is a little bit higher up here. But anyway, I went because of the mid-band and all the triggers. And ultimately, I got out with a second higher divergence. And I was like, God dang it, that was the high tick. And then they came down and gave a lower divergence. So a lot of times the new divergence will resume the trend, and I got back in again. And fortunately, system trade made it down to the fib. Had you not had tinkered with the system, it would have made all the money anyway. But anyway, I tinkered, and fortunately, I just took all the money at the fib, and that was it. So made a little good money right there. This was a system trade that I had off because of the management down here, and I forgot to turn it back on replay, and all that happened in like 3 or 4 minutes. So it's very, very fast. So I got in. This is where it would have gotten in, and then if you were waiting for some type of triggers rolling back up, continuation, but I got back in at the original spot, give or take. And ultimately, we went up to the pivot stop out, and the original was here, little roll and up above everything. And then, again, look, when the small triggers are below, I decided to have a tight management on that one. And ultimately, it went up anyway. And the system was trying to get long again, but I said if we hit this fib and 1-to-1, I'm not going to do it, which it didn't. And then this was a sell. Maybe I got these slides out of order where I was doing continuation of the sell. Anyway, I think I got that one wrong. Anyway, skip that slide. I think that was from earlier, but I put it in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. And then this, from 310, 312, 13, and 14, on 30 times replay, trying to speed through it, it got me long. And this is literally one of the worst looks on God's green earth for you to go long after a pivot stop out at fibs with 1-to-1s with a second divergence going long. You're going to get slaughtered. It's just wrong. I should have disabled the system there, but it did bounce, and I took a 4-point graceful exit. And then we put in another divergence from the fibs, which is even worse. Turn off that damn system. Don't take any more long trades. It didn't, but you get the point, right? If something looks like this up top, please don't take system long trades. Anyway, I sacrificed 4 points on that one. And then this one was discretionary. I don't think I ever got a fill on that one. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I don't have a slide for it. Okay, here is a trade that the system did short. Right here, short. Really great trade. Loved it. And the stop was above the mid band. I left it alone. Had you have managed it past the reversal bar marker, this would have been your continuation. Small triggers below the large, take a short, and then it still got me break even plus. And you would have got you out with a higher divergence. Anyway, it just never made it. But I let it go just as is, and it took a few ticks on a break even. And then had I wanted to continue short, after they got done horsing around from the mid band with double divergence and the small triggers get back below the large, That's the spot to continue, which I didn't take that one either. But you can see pretty clearly that's a pretty easy continuation right there. And then this was a system trade, literally perfect, textbook perfect. And trail a stop behind the pivot as we make our second potential divergence. Damn, second divergence got me out. It happens a lot, but better to get out there and not lose any money than be up here hoping it turns around. I did try from a reversal bar from the last spot possible, and because my small triggers from the wrong side, I lost. So shame on me, but I did it anyway because I felt good about it. But anyway, didn't want to miss. So you can chalk that one up to getting in continuation on the wrong side from the edge. But anyway, if it goes, it's genius, and if it doesn't, you only lose a little bit. And then one-to-ones with divergence potential, not going to work usually. So notice this right here, divergence from one-to-ones. The system got in. I turned it back on so it could do it, so I could teach you and show you. Not one that I would do myself personally, but I let the system get long. You stop below the reversal bar marker, worst case. Doesn't matter where you put the stop. Once you have divergence from one-to-ones, you're bound to lose your trend trade 8 out of 10 times. So anyway, this was system trade. No, this was one discretionary because I had termination, 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 termination. Triggers were going down, but they weren't quite below the mid band yet. But I was like, man, if this pivot stop out holds, I got to do at least one short. And because my replay was at 30 times, it was a great short right up until the time it hit the one-to-ones and pivot stop out on the big chart, which was also a pivot stop out on the small chart. And I ended up losing money on it. Because the replay was just so fast. So should have been a win, but it turned into a loss. So anyway, as we got back up to the edge, usually that's the edge where I like to take another short, but divergence usually will resume the trend, and it did right up until the time we got back to one-to-ones with divergence. And just like I've said a million times, one-to-ones with divergence will ruin your trend trade aspirations. On replay, I forgot to turn the system off, so it got me in. Look where it got me in. That's horrible. Fortunately, I was able to get a break even out of it because I had my stop up above everything. But just anyway, one-to-ones with divergence, be mindful of whether you really want to take them or not. And then ultimately, this is a trend trade which I felt super strongly about. Lower divergence, higher divergence, break out of everything, went long at the one-to-ones, everything was perfect. The stop was below the last line, so I let it go. I just said, hey, let it go. If it gets stopped out, it gets stopped out. And fortunately it didn't. But as we made it back to this is the worst look you can ever get for going long. Triggers down, everything in your way. I was like, man, I'm just going to get to break even. And fortunately, it actually ripped on through. You never know what's going to happen. It's a Mark Douglas special right there. But anyway, I wasn't willing to lose, but I actually turned it into a winner. Unfortunately, it got me long again, which I was okay with, and I used the pivot as a stop here. And ultimately, it got back up into the large triggers again that were crossed the wrong way, and I managed to only lose 2 points, 2 to 3 points. So that's not too bad management from a system trade. Kind of the same thing that happened on the previous, where it was back to all the triggers against me, and I said no losses. Kind of the same look. Back, long system trade, back into the triggers against me. I lost a few points, but I couldn't help it. So ultimately, I stopped at 4 o'clock. Was going to do 2 full days for you guys, but as you can see, this is a heap load of work. And yesterday, I spent all day down with a stomach bug that I lost about 10 pounds on. So I just don't have the energy to do a second day. But one day with some small chart management, skipping all of the perfect extra trades I could have done, messing up on a couple, I netted out about 7,200. I remember on Thursday I was up over 8 grand during the trading session, and on Friday I made over 7 grand too. So if I would have the energy to do another day, you'd see another $7,000 or $8,000 on the second day, just by using management on your small chart and a little bit of common sense. Keep in mind, version 1 of our strategy is large chart only. Version 2 of our strategy, which will be out after my programmer gets off vacation, is going to be small chart management included. So a lot of these things that I just went through will be incorporated into the strategy next. Obviously, we feel it's going to be a much more powerful version. It's a great version now, but you really kind of have to keep your eye on it and manage it to get the most out of it. If you guys are interested in owning a lifetime membership, we have it available on our website. You'll get all the upgrades for free, so you don't have to do it. Once we get done with version 2, we're going to go to a lease only mode. And we'll probably charge $2,000 a month for the lease is what I'm looking at for the strategy. So if you want to own it indefinitely, $5,000 now. If you want to wait till there's a lease version, you can demo it and spend time with it. That's fine. We'll give you a demo. If you want to own it now, you can own it now. Once we get the next version done, version 2, we're not going to sell any more lifetimes. So anyway, I appreciate you guys taking the time on the weekend with me, and I will see you guys in class tomorrow.